Hi, thanks everybody for joining us. We're just going to wait a few seconds to let folks join. All right, while we wait for a few more folks to join, welcome everybody and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Matt Mahoney. I'm the Director of Government Affairs with Sustainable Pittsburgh and appreciate everybody joining us today for our Sustainable Community Development Network Policy Connection, where we're going to dig into environmental justice and some of the programs and resources that have recently been made available through federal legislation. Just a reminder to everybody, this session will be recorded and we'll be sharing the materials afterwards. So everybody, if anybody has any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box and we'll have contact information at the end. So if anybody would like to follow up on anything specifically, happy to do that. So with that, let's begin. So here at Sustainable Pittsburgh, our mission is we're committed to building the knowledge, perspective, and ability needed to create a better tomorrow for our region. We're optimistic, having worked with nearly thousands of businesses, communities, and organizations to take action using our customized frameworks to track progress and simultaneously advance social equity, environmental stewardship, and prosperity. The strategic networks we host leverage the collective expertise and diverse perspective within our region to ensure our communities can meet our challenges today and thrive into the future. So you might be asking, how do we do this? And in our work, onto the next slide. So what do we do? Well, our team of subject matter experts has designed and manages a set of designation programs that offer recognition for organizations to measure sustainability achievements and frameworks to understand and track progress. So these programs are open to restaurants, small businesses, local governments, and a wide variety of workplaces. In addition, we host a few networks to promote leadership and peer-to-peer learning and target action on sustainability topics. And we also recognize and act on emergent issues that present challenges in our region. And our broad scope of expertise and relationships enable us to elevate urgent issues, to encourage action, and promote education so that all people can succeed. So on to some of those designation programs. Here at Sustainable Pittsburgh, we oversee 4 programs that recognize sustainability actions. First, the SHOP program, which is open to retail shops with 50 employees or less, the restaurant program, which is open to food establishments with a kitchen, and the workplace program, which is open to all types of businesses and organizations, including large and small businesses, nonprofits, and institutions such as universities. And finally, we have our Sustainable Pennsylvania program, which we'll go into a little bit deeper. So each of these programs offers an online questionnaire to assess sustainability performance and learn so that we can take steps in key areas like carbon reduction, employee hiring, supplier management, and environmental justice. Currently, over 500 businesses are participating in our 500 businesses, organizations, and municipalities are participating in our programs and have earned designation across various performance metrics. In another way that we're working to co-create fundamentally equitable, resilient, healthy, and a prosperous Southwest PA is by convening networks. And one of our most recognizable networks is our CEOs for Sustainability, which is an outcome-based network for C-suite leaders of well-aligned companies to share best practices, collaborate, and grow the ranks of those that enjoy the benefits of the triple bottom line for people, planet, and profits. We believe that this is the only group in the nation where CEOs provide this type of regional thought leadership around business sustainability. One of the key topics that we're focusing on across, as I mentioned, we focus on urgent issues. And one of those issues happens to be decarbonization, regional decarbonization. So over the past year, Sustainable Pittsburgh has gathered feedback from over 200 regional stakeholders and have identified key priorities and immediate next steps we can take to achieve comprehensive, equity-driven, multi-sector decarbonization. And we're continuing to investigate, engage, and actively participate in our region's discussion on how we can achieve that goal. So another network, and why we're all here today, is our Sustainable Community Development Network. And in this network, we aim to bring experienced sustainable development practitioners together with other leaders looking to increase their understanding and capacity for sustainable development practices, and continue hosting sustainable educational activities such as our webinar today. We promote and support policies to accelerate sustainable solutions by joining hands across the region and encourage action that helps to help communities initiate and complete concrete projects. So just a bit of background on Sustainable Pittsburgh and the work that we're doing. Now let's jump into the actual content of why we're here today. So today we're focusing on environmental justice, and we're thrilled to be joined by a representative from the Department of Energy who will be talking more about energy justice and the importance of social and economic participation in our energy systems and what Justice 40 and environmental justice means to the Department of Energy. But before we get into that discussion, I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague Sawyer, who is going to provide a quick overview of the Sustainable PA program. So over the past few years, our team has worked hard to update these certification programs, including our Sustainable Pennsylvania program. And while we have you here, we wanted to provide you with a quick refresher on that program and the topics that are covered and its benefits. So Sawyer, I'll pass it off to you.
All right. As Matt mentioned, I'm going to be talking about Sustainable Pennsylvania and in that program. The Pennsylvania Municipal League and Sustainable Pittsburgh have been working together since 2013 to help Pennsylvania municipalities realize the benefits of sustainability. And as mentioned earlier, Sustainable Pittsburgh is a nonprofit-based organization in Pittsburgh that has been promoting sustainable development in our region for 25 years through the programs and networks we offer to hundreds of municipal business leaders and municipal leaders. Together, we offer the Pennsylvania Sustainable the Sustainable Pennsylvania Certification Program that we simply call Sustainable Pennsylvania. Since 2016, Pennsylvania's Department of Community and Economic Development has asked all municipal governments seeking funding to indicate what level they have achieved in Sustainable Pennsylvania. So let's dive into what Sustainable Pennsylvania has to offer. First, let's talk about why sustainability matters. It helps local leaders create value for their community, both today and into the future. It works both at the level of municipal operations and at the level of community development. Your municipality can realize benefits from sustainability, like increased ability to attract and engage employees, cost savings due to efficiency improvements, and improved financial performance, such as saving taxpayer money. As a community, sustainable development can attract residents and businesses, improve public health, and manage crises like floods. Local leaders have a profound role to play in protecting and enhancing quality of life and access to opportunity in Pennsylvania communities. And sustainability is a fundamental part of achieving that. Benefits of the certification. Participating in Sustainable Pennsylvania and getting certified offers several benefits. The program's questionnaire can serve as an action plan for advancing your sustainability performance, and the program also offers resources, tools, and best practices to help take next steps. The sustainability progress has many real benefits, such as increasing employee engagement, lowering operational costs, as well as appealing to new and current residents. Second, getting certified helps your community be recognized as a leader in sustainability and offers many promotional and marketing opportunities. Sustainable Pennsylvania provides a promotional kit with each certification we award, which includes a badge for inclusion on your website, job postings, reports, and other uses. It also includes a guide to promoting your designation via social media and a press release template and other resources. As you can see here, the program asks about a comprehensive set of sustainability topics. In addition to helping you assess your sustainability performance in these key areas, the question framework also serves as a jumping off point for a sustainability action plan. This is because the answers to each question progress from first steps to advanced actions, providing a step-by-step guidance for how your community can advance its performance in each area. There are 4 steps to getting certified. First, you'll need to create an account. Second, you'll answer all the questions in the program, starting with a few on-ramp questions. These on-ramp questions help to tailor and filter the questions throughout the rest of the program so that you're answering questions that are suited for your municipality. You can work as a team of colleagues to complete the assessment. Third, after you complete your assessment and submit it, our staff will provide feedback on your responses that you will have a chance to address before submitting your final answers. This all occurs within our tech platform with automatic emails alerting you when your activity has occurred in the portal. And last, you'll earn bronze, silver, gold, or platinum certification based on 2 criteria: the total percentage of points you've earned, or whether or not you've completed the actions required for each certification level. Certification timeline. There is no deadline for participating in this program. You can earn your certification at your own pace. Once you are certified, the certification will last for 3 years, but you do not need to wait for your certification to expire before you seek a new one. You can log back into your account at any time to view your saved answers and update whichever ones you would like to seek a higher certification level. This means that you will not have to re-answer every question each time you resubmit. In fact, the system allows us to give each answer or each question in the program its own expiration date. So some will prompt you for updates within 1 year, some after 3 years, and some not until 5 years. For example, you won't have to update or re-report on, say, your strategic plan every year. This also means that if you log in prior to the overall designation 3-year expiration date, you will have to re-answer fewer questions to keep your certification active. So some next steps, some action items. You can log on to sustainablepa.org and click log in or start certification at the top right of the page to start your journey in the Sustainable Pennsylvania Certification Program. I'm also happy to meet and talk with anybody that might have more questions that they have about the certification program. And you can email me at sseidlinger@sustainablepittsburgh.org. And I'm going to hand it back to Matt now.
Thanks so much, Sawyer. Very much appreciated. And I want to reemphasize asking folks if anybody is interested to please contact Sawyer or anybody at the Sustainable Pittsburgh team to learn more about the Sustainable Pennsylvania Certification Program and participants and the benefits of the program. So at Sustainable Pittsburgh, we know that municipalities have a profound role and responsibility for leading the way to quality of life and equitable access to opportunities. And we know sustainability in terms of environments, equity, and economy. That is a sustainable community. A sustainable community is one that can thrive economically while minimizing harm to and even creating positive value for society and the environment. And with this in mind, we've been paying very close attention to the federal programs that have been made available to local governments that can be used to activate sustainable solutions for a variety of issues that face our communities. And with these programs have arisen new initiatives that will help us attract funding and improve quality of life in our communities. One of those initiatives is the Justice 40 initiative. And the Justice 40 initiative, which was originally led by a group of environmental justice leaders, academics, and advocates working to highlight the need for federal climate programs to directly benefit those most affected by resulting poverty and pollution. And what has borne out of this convening of thought leaders was the Justice 40 initiative, which is now a national effort that calls for federal agencies to work with state and local governments to ensure at least 40% of the gains from federal environmental justice investments are benefiting disadvantaged communities. It's been described as a whole of government approach, where the Justice 40 initiative provides a framework to measure the impacts of federal programs that focus on clean energy, energy efficiency, workforce development, environmental remediation, and critical water infrastructure to support communities that have been historically marginalized, underserved, and overburdened. Justice 40 also provides an accountability framework, a justice-oriented awarding criteria, and robust community engagement programming to ensure the objectives of the Justice 40 initiative are met. So I mentioned those recent federal programs, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, offer a timely example of the abundant opportunities to put Justice 40 into action. The infrastructure bill has over $1.2 trillion with more than 350 new and existing programs. The Inflation Reduction Act, $360 billion in tax credits and grant programs to address clean energy, transportation, water infrastructure, and workforce development. And we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to leverage these historic investments to win opportunities with and for those that have the most to gain. The interim guidance that's been issued summarizes actions federal agencies should take on the path to achieving Justice 40, such as establishing minimum thresholds for specific benefit allocations, prioritizing solicitations that include community engagement and feedback, so very important, and guiding applicants to reinvest cost savings into disadvantaged communities. Several agencies have already started developing tools to help states and local governments deliver on Justice 40 objectives, and that's why we're here today. So we're here today to talk about Justice 40 and environmental justice, and we're very happy to be joined by James Strange from the Department of Energy. James is specialized, and we can go to the next slide to show James. James is specialized in energy law and policy and has worked across state lines assisting government agencies, nonprofits, and businesses pursue their renewable energy and equity goals. Until recently, James was counsel for an organization that oversees the nation's largest solar storage and transportation electrification program, and he's currently serving as a senior policy advisor for the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Economic Impact and Diversity. So we're happy to have James join us and have him present on information regarding Justice 40 and environmental justice from the Department of Energy's purview. So James, if we could have you join onto the screen and jump into your presentation, we'd be grateful and look forward to learning and writing down as many notes as I possibly can. So thanks, James. I'll let you take it from here.
Great, thank you, Matt. I appreciate the introduction. I don't know if I could have said it better myself. Thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you to Sustainable Pittsburgh for asking me here to speak with you today. My name is James Strange, and I am an Energy and Environmental Justice Policy Advisor at the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity at the Department of Energy. This office within the DOE is leading the charge towards ensuring once-in-a-generation funding under the IIJA and IRA reach historically underserved and underrepresented communities via the Justice 40 initiative and other strategies. We don't have much time to cover the topics here today, so if you could please jot down any questions you have during the presentation and place them in the chat. I promise we'll get to them at the Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. So before we jump into the Justice of 40 initiative and where it started and how it works, I thought it might be helpful to first speak to what the concept of justice means within the context of energy. What exactly is energy justice and why does it matter? Well, simply stated, energy justice means ensuring equitable access and participation in the energy system while minimizing or eliminating any harms. Deploying our energy more justly means offering energy in ways that are more affordable, clean, and benefits everyone. Next slide, please. Now, I'm sure many of you are thinking, sure, that sounds agreeable, but why this emphasis on energy justice now? Why has the federal government taken this concept up and made it a priority across all and much of its legislation? Well, if we could get a click, please. To put it in simplest terms, how our energy infrastructure was built and is fueled has had unintended consequences for certain communities across our country. And to show you what I mean, I'll walk us through a couple of examples, one in California and then one in the Appalachian region. Next slide. On your screen is an example of how our energy and transportation systems disproportionately impact low-income households, impacts that can have profound negative outcomes on health, affordability, and community livelihood. The map on the left displays the concentration of particulate matter, or PM 2.5, across California. PM 2.5 is very small airborne pollution particle, less than 2.5 micrometers in thickness, or about less than a human hair. PM 2.5 is a mixture of particles that include organic chemicals, dust, soot, and metals. These particles can come from cars and trucks, factories, wood burning, coal mining, and other industrial activities. They can travel deep into the lungs because they are so small and cause various health problems. Children, the elderly, and people suffering from heart or lung disease, asthma, or other chronic illnesses are most sensitive to the effects of PM2.5 exposure. The image on the right displays the concentration of households in California under the federal poverty level. These two graphics evidence the unfortunate fact that the highest concentrations of PM2.5 appear in regions with the lowest household incomes. In the next slide, we'll zoom in on one area of underinvestment and show how harmful concentrations of emissions have very real and measurable effects on specific communities. So here is a map of the Bay Area in California. The map on the far left shows you the concentration of emissions caused largely in part by gas peaker plants in the Bay Area of San Francisco. Peaker plants are activated when the electric grid is experiencing stress and burn natural gas or other fuels to meet generation demand. The map in the middle shows you the health impacts this activity has on surrounding communities. Emergency room visits for asthma are significantly higher in this region. So this is just one health indicator that speaks to the increased rates of cancer, heart disease, and pulmonary issues these communities face compared to their neighbors. The map on the far right shows you how these impacts also tend to disproportionately affect communities of color. And like we discussed earlier, household median income is also a strong indicator for how likely you are to be subject to greater pollution as a result of our energy system. Regrettably, this trend, we can identify this trend in many other parts of the country. Next slide, please. Here we have a map spanning the Appalachian region from northern Alabama through Kentucky and West Virginia, parts of Ohio, through Pennsylvania, and up into southern New York. This region is highly coal industry dependent and experiences high levels of particulate emissions. All this activity is directly tied to how we extract and deliver energy. Next slide, please. Concurrently, though not surprisingly, when we look at other similarly situated regions across the US, this area also experiences high levels of mortality due to lung cancer, pulmonary disease, and other chronic illnesses. In case it's hard to see, that red line in the graph in front of you shows that mortality in the Appalachian coal counties is approximately 35% higher than the rest of the United States and 10 to 15% higher than surrounding communities. In addition, the communities in this region have also experienced historic underinvestment and higher than average rates of poverty. Next slide, please. This is an ironic and painful one-two punch because while these communities extract our energy and bear the highest environmental burdens of those activities, they then end up paying more for that energy as a proportion of their household income. On average, low-income households spend 3 times more of their income on energy costs compared to the median spending of non-low-income households. So how do we begin to address these disparities? And what can we do moving forward to ensure these communities gain access to resources that reduce energy burden, provide clean energy, and produce opportunity? Next slide, please. So these realities and the desire to begin to address them on a national scale is what led us to the Justice 40 initiative. Justice 40 began its start on January 27, 2021, when the president issued executive order tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. At the bottom of this executive order was section 223, which kicked off the Justice 40 initiative and directed OMB, in collaboration with other federal agencies, to publish recommendations on how certain federal investments might be made toward a goal that 40% of the overall benefits of those certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities. Now, this was truly monumental and a first of its kind directive for the federal government that caused a lot of excitement and anticipation, but it also raised a lot of questions that can be categorized within how we define the words in orange and blue and green on your screen. Next slide. Namely, what are federal investments? What are benefits? And what are disadvantaged communities as directed by the executive order? Furthermore, how do we ensure benefits are flowing to these communities towards this goal? We'll go over these definitions and other questions in the next few slides, which should provide some clarity, as well as show you some tools that will help you in this endeavor. Next slide, please. So as directed by the executive order, OMB issued interim implementation guidance for the Justice 40 initiative. This guidance provided that covered investments include existing and new programs, including those created by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, that make covered investments in climate change, clean energy and energy efficiency, clean transportation, affordable and sustainable housing, training and workforce development, remediation and reduction of legacy pollution, and clean water and waste infrastructure. And if that sounds like a rather expansive list, you'd be right, especially concerning DOE funding. In July of 2022, OMB released what programs are covered by the Justice 40 initiative across the federal family. And for the DOE specifically, this means 140 different DOE programs across 23 separate offices. You can see a full list of DOE covered programs on DOE's website by simply searching DOE Justice 40 covered programs. But for clarity's sake, much of the funding this group might be interested in here today, such as funding from offices like the State and Community Energy Programs Office, EECBG grants, NEVI grants, WAP, all these programs are Justice 40 covered. So thus, to conclude, if you're applying for or will be receiving DOE funds, it's very likely that they will be a covered program under Justice 40. And the federal government will likely be asking that you consider how your funding may be applied to ensure that 40% of benefits are flowing to disadvantaged communities. And in case you're curious, before you is a table of all the covered programs across the federal family, all just as important, major ones through the EPA and HHS. But DOE by far has the most, which I think gives us a little bit of headroom to lead the way for the federal government. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that we know what covered federal investments means, what are disadvantaged communities? How does a prospective or current recipient of federal funds know what communities should be a priority in their jurisdiction? In accordance with OMB guidance, the DOE created its own tool and methodology to identify disadvantaged communities. DOE's working definition of disadvantage is based on cumulative burden and includes data for 36 indicators at the census tract level. In addition, to be considered a DAC under the DOE's definition, the census tract must rank in or above the 80th percentile, the cumulative sum of all those burdens. And at the state level, the census tract must contain at least 30% of households classified as low income. DOE created this tool to better understand community burdens as they relate to energy specifically, and ensure a methodology existed for identifying disadvantaged communities for funding that we had to get out the door immediately or was under statutory deadline. Now, OMB guidance also directed the Council of Environmental Quality to develop the Climate Economic Justice Screening Tool, or CJEST for short, for use across the federal family. This tool is similar to DOE's, but uses different methodologies and indicators to identify communities of concern. The reason why this tool is outlined in red on your right is that within the last 6 weeks, OMB released new guidance that directs all federal agencies to transition from their own tools and methodology to the use of CJEST by the 4th quarter of this year. Accordingly, if you are just starting the process of using these tools to identify communities of concern in your area or jurisdiction, DOE recommends you use the CJEST tool on the right. That said, the DOE DAC reporter on the left features more ability to identify specific burdens or indicators related to energy in the communities. And it might still be a useful tool to help you kind of narrow in on different indicators that might be relevant to the programs you're trying to design. Next slide, please. We often get questions regarding how these tools compare. Simply stated, there is a substantial amount of overlap between the tools and definitions, but CJEST overall identifies more US Census tracts as disadvantaged. So to kind of wrap this section up, when designing your program or formulating your application, DOE recommends you start with the CJEST tool to concretely identify any disadvantaged communities in your area that could benefit from federal funding. Subsequent tools like DOE's DAC reporter or other state or federal tools that might be out there to help you identify burdens, we encourage the use of as well to help you sort of color in the lines and better understand your communities. Next slide. Okay, so now that we covered federal investments and we have tools to locate disadvantaged communities, what are benefits and how are those derived from federal funding exactly? And how do we know if these benefits are flowing into what areas? As you might imagine, benefits look very different depending on whether you're operating on funding for the EPA or the Department of the Interior or DHHS. So to ensure we're focusing on benefits most directly tied to energy or positive outcomes that can be achieved via energy investments, the DOE established the following 8 policy priorities to outline outcomes that could be identified as benefits. So just so we can sit here a little bit with these, I'll read them off. Those priorities are decreases in energy burden, decreases in environmental exposure and burdens, increases in jobs and training, increases in enterprise creation, increases in energy democracy, increases in low-cost capital, increases in clean energy access and adoption, and increases in energy resilience. Now, I realize this might be a little abstract, so the next slide will provide some examples of measurable benefits that fit under these policy priorities, and also how they fit under typical DOE-funded uses. Next slide, please. So here we have the major categories of activities that DOE funding participants usually undertake. Listed under them are benefit metrics that can be tracked as they relate to these activities. So sometimes your funding opportunity allows you to make direct connections to the communities you're serving and have obvious metrics. For example, where are your energy retrofits taking place, or energy systems that you're installing located? Are they in a disadvantaged community? What impacts do these have for fuel or cost savings? What emissions were abated by these activities? These are all numbers that you can hopefully easily track and attribute directly to a disadvantaged community if that's where they're taking place. You can also you can also ask yourself, who is benefiting from these program activities? And what and how many stakeholder engagements have you conducted? Does the program offer job training and recruitment? Likewise, how does your program reach communities to be served? What and how much of those activities, both in effort and dollars, marketing, education, and outreach, was conducted? In short, there are many options available to you when it comes to trying to understand and track what benefits are flowing to communities as a result of your funded activities. Now, one question we often get asked is, my program or activity is a study or a climate action plan update. How can I attribute benefits flowing to disadvantaged communities from activities like that? Well, we often respond with, have you engaged those communities for their opinion for your study? Have you considered the impacts of the policy priorities of the updated climate action plan on communities of concern in your jurisdiction? So to kind of put a period on this slide, we encourage you to always be thinking about how effective your program dollars are towards improving communities you serve and how you can track this progress. We often like to underscore that by going through this process of identifying metrics that identify performance and that can help you understand how you're benefiting communities, often it will help you in the long run. It'll help you, improve your program, make tweaks. It'll help you in designing future programs and knowing how effective those can be. And it also help you in sort of the public policy arena and justifying what you're doing and how it's working to the legislature, and other politicians. Okay, next slide. So another way to kind of look at this is to first examine the policy priorities. We're starting with the decrease in energy burden. What does that mean? Well, there are several different activities under the DOE that mean decreases in energy burden. Retrofits, energy audits, improvements to government buildings and schools. And there are several benefits and metrics that come out of investing in those technology areas for decreasing energy burden. Next slide, please. Okay, and then once you understand your program and you understand what policy priority it fits under and what metrics sort of come together under those different combinations, then you can begin to understand what communities, sorry, I got a call, what communities in your jurisdiction are most in need of help. So here we have several graphics that show the first one on the far left, CGEST. So in the Appalachian region we spoke about earlier, these are all the disadvantaged communities identified by the CGEST tool. From there, if you wish, you can kind of dive into the DOE DAC score and the DOE DAC reporter and understand specific energy burdens across this region. And this can be really helpful. So for example, Asheville on the screen on the far right, they're not a disadvantaged community, but they feature higher than average disproportionate impacts on energy burden. So, one question we often get is, I'm in a community or a jurisdiction that doesn't have any disadvantaged communities identified by CGEST or the DOE DAC reporter. What am I supposed to do? Am I in the wrong? Absolutely not. And there are still tools available to you like the DOE DAC reporter or EJ screen that can help you understand your community a little better and say, okay, we're doing building retrofits or we're doing weatherization. Where are the communities that need the focus the most? And so you can use these tools to kind of narrow in. Okay, next slide, please. So kind of wrapping up this section of Justice 40, we're kind of presenting this slide as another way to look at the process of designing a program. So first, what are you doing with the funding? Well, for example, like we talked about here, we're going to do building retrofits. Then number two, what do we want to achieve? Well, under the policy priorities, we want to decrease energy burden and increase energy resilience with these building retrofits. Great. For whom and where? Well, ideally for underfunded or underinvested areas or disadvantaged communities as identified by federal tools. And then finally, how are we going to track our progress? How are we going to measure where benefits are flowing? Well, you can do that in several ways. Number of buildings retrofitted, the savings from the retrofits, the reduction in fuel consumption achieved by those retrofits, and the estimated energy burden that's being relieved by all of this activity altogether. Next slide, please. So we often get asked, what examples exist out there in the United States that are sort of along the lines of a successful Justice 40 program. So we'll start with first a huge example. This is the Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing program in California. It's $1 billion program funded by greenhouse gas reduction funds. And the SOMA program is really unique in several ways. First, part of the eligibility criteria for applying to the program is whether your multifamily affordable housing unit is in a disadvantaged community. It also requires that 50% of the benefits of those solar systems actually flow to the tenants. So it's not good enough that you're just putting the solar system on the building. You need to also ensure that at least 50% of that system's capacity is going to benefiting the tenants and ensuring that other costs aren't being loaded on top of the tenants as a result of their energy savings coming from the system. The program also has a lot of job trainee and job apprenticeship elements as part of the program, where job candidates are actually sourced from the community and offered a job at the end of the job or the installation that's been presented to the affordable housing. This program encourages development in stacks as part of its eligibility criteria, ensures the monetary benefits of those clean energy installations flow to the residents of those areas, which is really what's interesting here. Now, a lot of people have said, that's great, that's California, have $1 billion. How does this transplant to something we're doing? And the great thing about this program is that it presents a pretty good framework that can be really downscaled. So for example, the city of San Diego wanted to replicate this program with the low-income solar program, and they were able to take the same sort of framework that created this program. And what I mean by that is they were able to look at disadvantaged communities in their area, implement job training requirements and system savings requirements into their program, and that program is only $1 million a year. And the impact means it's much smaller in terms of the amount of projects that they can do, but it's still applicable. Next slide, please. So the other program worth mentioning is the Hawaii State Energy Office Clean Energy Wayfinders program. This took a completely different approach to a Justice 40 lens on energy activities. And what the Hawaii State Energy Office did here was they identified a need for connecting with the community. They realized that the Hawaii State Energy Office had trouble actually making available to the communities most in need in their jurisdiction what programs they had access to under LIHEAP and WAP. There's also a lot of renewable energy funding and installation taking place in Hawaii. Hawaii has a 2045 renewable RPS standard that they're trying to reach. And so there's a lot of wind and solar going in the ground. And the Hawaii State Energy Office realized that they're having trouble reaching the communities for comment and ensuring that the communities understood and were connected with the development happening in their backyard. So what Hawaii did was they created wayfinders or community representatives that were trained in the different initiatives and community stakeholder engagement sessions taking place across the state. And these liaisons sort of interface with the community to make sure that they're being heard and that they have access to the different various programs that could assist them, especially ones located in disadvantaged communities. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and so I just wanted to underscore that everything we've kind of gone over here today, in most part, is located online. We have our general guidance for Justice 40 implementation. we're in the process of updating this based on newest OMB guidance, but that should be out shortly. And you can find it at the link in the slide here, or you just Google it, Department of Energy General Guidance for Justice 40 Implementation. We also have many other resources that speaks to funding that's available coming through IIJA, or bill as we call it, IRA, other legislation, and programs that the Department of Energy are formulating around that funding that could be most relevant to your communities out there across this region. So I will stop there and leave plenty of time available for questions.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much, James. I appreciate that. I have a few questions myself in the absence of anybody, so maybe it'll get the creative juices flowing for questions to start flowing in. I've been working to better understand the federal programs and help connect municipalities with information and resources to either jumpstart funding for a program that or a project that they may have in the queue, or a planned project that would align. But it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's so many different opportunities, and it seems like there's continuously new guidance, new programs, new issues coming up every day. So from a local government perspective, what would you recommend as sort of being the best way to connect with resources? I know you provided some of the resources and information there at the end of the slide deck, and we will be circulating this information along with the recording to everybody that's attending. But is there a good guidance or a good recommendation that you could provide for local governments sort of keeping their thumb on the pulse of specific on issues that they may be of most interest about, with regard to either Justice 40 or more broadly for disadvantaged communities?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question and a great point, Matt. So I suppose if your members are mostly local municipal governments who are interested in federal funding coming down the pipe, I would pay very close attention to what we call SCEP. I know we're often in acronym soup here, but the State Community Energy Programs Office. Through that office is going to be flowing state energy program funds and energy block grant funds. And 60% of those funds are reserved to municipalities. I think the application to apply for those funds for the top 10 municipalities in each state went out just a couple of weeks ago. That would be something I would definitely pay attention to. The states also have to turn around and reserve some of that funding in what could be formula or competitive grants to the states. So those will be coming down the pipe as well. The SCEP office is also going to be releasing additional grants soon. Can't speak to the funding or the exact type of opportunity, but there'll definitely be opportunities there for local governments. I think it's also important to highlight the CFI grant that just came out of the FHWA office in the Department of Transportation. That grant those grants will be administered co-jointly between the DOT and the Department of Energy through its joint office, which was created for bill for electric vehicle infrastructure. So there's going to be $700 million available this year for electric vehicle infrastructure projects. And that funding will continue throughout the next 5 years for a total of $2.5 billion.
Oh, wow, that's a lot. That's I think re-emphasizing the fire hose analogy. And here in Pennsylvania, our state energy office is housed within our state Department of Environmental Protection. Hopefully our participants know that, but if you're not and you'd like to be connected, Sustainable Pittsburgh is happy to be a connector with their office. We have relationships with folks in their office, and they are an incredible resource and have experience, as you likely know. In 2009, these energy efficiency and conservation block grants were available then. So we have a good, route for folks to take, and a solid staff working in the state energy office in Pennsylvania's Department of Environmental Protection to really take charge and see those funds activated as best as possible. I do see a question here in the Q&A, and I haven't had a chance to screen it, so I hope that there's a nothing out of sorts. But I'll just read the question. From what I hear, many of the municipalities that qualify under the Justice 40 program have not given much thought to proactive projects like renewable energy transition due to limited resources and capacity that have thus far kept them focused on projects to sustain existing systems and basically keep the lights on. Do you know of any programs or examples, precedents for helping to build capacity in these communities to even start to think about what they might be able to possibly cultivate together, projects so that they're able to make or take advantage of funding opportunities?
That's a really great question. And I think it underscores a really important aspect of the Justice 40 initiative, which is community and stakeholder engagement. So we do sometimes hear that, due to limited staff and resources, designing a sort of like perfect, well-running and high impact program is challenging, right? Especially when you're trying to access, underserved and disadvantaged communities. And we definitely think that that's a relevant comment. And I think one way of thinking about, completing that circle is the stakeholder community engagement portion of that. So, understanding what your community needs, understanding what their priorities are, is a great way to kind of begin that process. And it's a process that doesn't have to be labor intensive or consume a lot of resources, because a lot of times people find they're surprised by what exactly the communities are searching for, and what remedies exist to actually begin to ameliorate some of the the hardships that are experienced there. So in that Justice 40 guidance I mentioned earlier, we have a whole section on effective stakeholder engagement, and that might be one place to start. And I feel like there was a second portion of that question that I might not be totally addressing.
Well, it's sort of asking what specific programs may be available, and I know in Justice 40 is whole of government approach, so it's not just Department of Energy, it's also EPA, it's also Department of Transportation, it's all federal agencies. And I know within the EPA there are grant programs, including the collaborative problem solving government to government grant, as well as community-based grant program that was just recently released, although the application is due April 10th. But we do expect more of those funds to be available in the future. But within the Department of Energy, are there programs that help elevate capacity and encourage community engagement in a similar way to help identify where opportunities may exist? I think that's where the question is leading.
Yes, and the unfortunate aspect of the Justice 40 initiative being new for the federal government and for the Department of Energy means that we're just getting started on a lot of our funding opportunities, and the examples for how this new directive being implemented are sort of pending. But fortunately, there are a lot of examples in the states, and actually, I think Pennsylvania has an excellent example, and they have a clean fuels grant program that comes out of the Department of Environmental Protection. I think DEP is in Pennsylvania.
That's great.
And one of the eligibility criteria for that clean fuels incentive grant is, are you serving or are you implementing in a disadvantaged community? And so, again, through stakeholder engagement, identifying, what the needs are of the community and trying to tailor your program within the resources that you have to at least trying to address those needs. And to kind of walk that back a little more. Sometimes it's just the helpful activity is just understanding what those needs are, or ensuring that you're reaching those communities. So if you have just enough resources to keep the program you have going, and you don't anticipate a lot of changes, there are questions you can ask yourself, like, how are we advertising this program? What communities are we reaching with our marketing, education, and outreach? What surveys have we done? Have we actually thought about trying to ensure these resources as best as possible are directed towards the communities of highest need in our jurisdiction? And I think that's where I'll stop the ramble there.
No, that's all very helpful, and I think it somewhat leads into this next question we just received on community benefits agreements, sort of helping to build the capacity and help municipalities take proactive steps in identifying where there is alignment between these federal initiatives and the community level needs. So can you talk a little bit more about community benefits agreements? The question says, I understand that they will be a part of scoring processes for certain funding streams. So are there sort of metrics that the Department of Energy will be scoring with or considering within those CBAs, sort of thinking about how community benefits agreements are a part of the Justice 40 ecosystem that's being developed?
Yeah, sure. There are kind of two universes of funding at the DOE. One is formula, which is sort of what EECBG and state energy planning funds are, and then we have competitive. And those competitive funding opportunities we call FOAs, or funding opportunity announcements. And you're right, within those FOAs, we have implemented a community benefits plan portion. So that portion is scored 20% of the overall application. And within that community benefits plan, we're asking four primary things. Basically, what is your stakeholder engagement plan, or community or stakeholder engagement plan? What is your workforce development and jobs plan? What is your DEI plan? And what is your Justice 40 plan? Now, we had to, because those FOAs apply to possibly billions of dollars of funding and possibly $1 million of funding, we kind of had to take an umbrella approach. So, how you respond to that section of the FOA will be sort of relevant to the funding opportunity and the amount of funding that exists. But, if you're invested in a high dollar, big impact project, the expectation will be, have you engaged the community in a comprehensive level? Have you identified what benefits could flow from your project to that community? And then how are you going to track progress? And then how are you going to hold yourself accountable to that community? So there are a lot of examples across the country, but typically, one method or structure for a community benefits plan is to formulate an advisory council out of local CBOs, environmental groups, and businesses, chambers of commerce that will sort of help you as the prime who's moving through this funding opportunity and deploying an energy system or other program to comment on and receive your commitments that you've made and provide feedback. And those community benefits plans, as they're formulated at the application and award stage, are sort of then wrapped up into the terms and conditions of the agreement, and they're treated like any other milestone that would be part of the funding opportunity.
No, it sounds like a great opportunity for an organization like Sustainable Pittsburgh to be a resource for those municipalities and maybe those that don't have the capacity to pull in, or just have a sounding board, somebody to have a sounding board that is unbiased and can provide sustainability expertise when developing community development plans, or just setting the tone, or identifying what next steps could possibly be taken from a local government perspective to advance goals and activate some of these funds within the Justice 40 context. One of the things that we talk a lot about at Sustainable Pittsburgh is community engagement, like authentic, genuine community engagement. And I know you mentioned sort of, some of the forms that are required, and sort of, some of the, typical formats that we see community engagement look like. But one of the things that we always sort of emphasize is that community engagement looks different in each of these different contexts, where community engagement on a transportation issue may look very different from a community engagement on energy related issues. So are there, can you maybe describe where this spectrum of community engagement may exist within the Department of Energy related to Justice 40? With all of these new requirements for community engagement, we're hopeful that meaningful engagement will take place, and not just sort of here, let's have a meeting, check the box, and let's move on. So have you seen examples of where you say, well, that's community engagement, that's what we're talking about? And sorry to put you on the spot if
No,
that's
I mean,
if
that's a great question. And there's a lot tied up in there. So I'm trying to organize my thoughts a little
it's
bit.
a loaded question. I'll fully
Without,
admit that.
without getting myself into trouble. There are procurement concerns about, pending applications. So I can't get into, I need to make sure that the details I provide are sufficiently hypothetical. But I will say that one thing that we took great pains to ensure was that we weren't too prescriptive in our requirements for stakeholder engagement. So, the DOE is not going to be asking you for, you need to do 10 stakeholder engagement sessions, and you need to have this many people in your community, and you need to do this many surveys. You have to take these 3 comments and incorporate them into milestones, and we're going to be tracking it quarterly. We weren't that prescriptive in our requests to funding applicants. Basically, what we're asking you for is responsible and common sense community engagement, whatever that looks like for your funding opportunity. So if you are applying for, or in receipt of $100,000 for building retrofits or a similar kind of project, obviously we're not going to be able to do 10 stakeholder engagement sessions at the community center or the convention center and include 500 community members and hire Deloitte to do an aggregate analysis of the comments and rank them. But I think what we would be looking for in that instance is, do you have a plan? Have you engaged in the thought process of how do we get community feedback or input on this? Or how do we better understand community desires? And how do we wrap that feedback into the design or the outputs of our program? And I think those are the programs that are most, or I should say the applications that are really successful are the ones that are able to articulate, this was our plan for engaging the community. This is our plan for being accountable to community expectations. And this is how we're going to take that community feedback and make it part of the way we design this program or deploy our project. And hopefully that provides a little clarity.
That is helpful. So within that explanation, sort of what I pulled away was flexibility is key, and that seems to be inherent within the outpouring of the guidance or the thought from the Department of Energy and likely other federal agencies as they're considering what community engagement looks like. I think flexibility is absolutely a key portion, and that's very welcome. And also recognizing sort of where Justice 40 and a lot of these programs stand, where we're operating in an interim guidance landscape where it's not final guidance. We're still working on figuring it out. So that's part of why we're here today. And James, really appreciate you providing your perspective and expertise on this issue as we're sorting it out and figuring it out and finding ways to connect people to resources so they can advance sustainability activities and improve outcomes for disadvantaged communities across the spectrum. So I think that brings us to a point where we can come to a closing. And I will make one note from one of our partners that's on the call regarding community benefits agreements. The Reimagine Appalachia is hosting a 2-day community benefits summit on May 23rd and 25th, where folks across the region will be able to learn about the process and how to put it all together. Natalia put a link in the chat, so encourage you all to take a look there. So appreciate you putting that in the chat, Natalia. Well, and that brings us to our conclusion. James, do you have any closing remarks or words you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. I just wanted to say that sometimes we can get really wrapped up in the requirements and the 40% and the different requirements that we have to meet across all the paperwork that we deal with on a daily basis. And I just wanted to underscore that the 40% of benefits sort of call to action is a goal. And really what this whole initiative is about is trying to ensure that federal dollars to the best extent possible reach the communities most in need in your jurisdiction. And we are stewards as people who work for the government, and our charge is to meet the needs of the people, all people. And so I hope that what you take away from this mostly is the federal government is behind you in that activity, and we really hope that you can kind of take away from this presentation tools to help you meet the needs of your community. That's really what this is about.
Absolutely. And that's well heard. And I can attest to very responsive folks from multiple agencies, and especially the Department of Energy. And that's very welcome, especially with the fire hose of resources that we're seeing outpour throughout our country. So thank you so much, James. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Sawyer, for presenting on Sustainable Pennsylvania certification program. Appreciate everybody's attendance, and please do follow up with anybody here at Sustainable Pittsburgh about our programs. We will be circulating the information from this webinar shortly. It will be available on our website. But again, thank you so much for everybody's attention, and appreciate it. And please stay in touch. And we'll be talking more about these programs, I'm sure, for the many more months to come. So thank you all. Appreciate it.